On the night of May 12, 2026, the federal government handed down a budget that quietly rewrote the rules for every property investor in Australia. Negative gearing on established homes, gone for anything bought after that night. The 50% capital gains discount replaced with a new system starting July 2027. And for landlords using a discretionary trust, a 30% minimum tax kicks in from mid-2028. That's the federal shock. But in Victoria, it's landing on top of a state tax system that was already pushing investors out the door. This is the story of what happens when both hit at once, and why agents in Melbourne are saying they've never seen anything like it. Let's break down what just changed, who it's hitting, and why renters are the ones who'll feel it first.
Here's the setup. Victoria didn't get into this position overnight. Back on January 1, 2024, the state government slashed the land tax-free threshold from $300,000 down to just $50,000. That single change pulled tens of thousands of investment properties into the tax net for the first time. One landlord in Wangaratta, a guy named Gary Salathiel, told Yahoo Finance his land tax bill went from $397 to $600 to $3,096 in 3 years. His words, "The $3,096 absolutely floored me." Another investor, Ariane Andreezy, said her land tax on a Red Cliffs property crossed $1,000 for the first time this year, and when her tenants moved out, that was the final push to sell. James Kirkland, who runs sales at Little Real Estate, told Yahoo Finance that Victoria now has the highest percentage of investment properties coming onto the market of anywhere his agency operates. According to him, it's largely to do with the holding costs and the impact it's having on yields. So that's the backdrop heading into 2026. The state already had a reputation. Property investment professionals of Australia named Victoria the least accommodating state in the country for investors 2 years running.
Now let's get into what the data actually shows, because this isn't just landlords venting. Victoria's Residential Tenancies Bond Authority recorded something that had never happened in over 20 years of tracking. In the March 2025 quarter, more rental bonds were refunded than new ones lodged. Over 3,000 more refunds than lodgements in a single quarter. That means thousands of properties left the rental pool in 3 months, and most of them didn't come back as rentals. They sold to owner-occupiers instead. Zoom out to the full year, and rental bond data showed Victoria lost close to 25,000 rental properties in the year ending September 2024, about 3.6% of the entire rental stock in the state. Melbourne alone lost over 23,000 of those. Pipa's most recent investor sentiment survey found 22.1% of Melbourne investors sold at least one property in the past year, the highest rate of any capital city in the country, just ahead of Brisbane. And of the properties that sold, the survey found 65% went to owner-occupiers, not other investors. Every one of those is a rental that's gone for good. Now, here's where it gets complicated, and where I want to be straight with you about something. Even with all that selling, Melbourne house prices haven't crashed. CoreLogic data shows Melbourne's median house price actually rose about 4% over the past year, sitting around $974,000. KPMG is forecasting another 6.6% gain for houses in 2026. So the exodus and the price growth have been happening at the same time, which tells you something. Demand for housing in Melbourne hasn't gone anywhere. It's specifically rental supply that's been shrinking. That's why the vacancy rate tells the real story. SQM Research has Melbourne's rental vacancy sitting around 1.5 to 1.6%, well under the 3% level economists consider a balanced market. The national vacancy rate is sitting at just 1.2%.
Now, here's the part that's brand new, and it's not even a Victorian policy. It's federal, which means it hits every landlord in the state regardless of what Spring Street does next. On budget night, May 12, 2026, the government announced that negative gearing on existing residential properties is being quarantined for any property bought after 7:30 p.m. that night. If you already owned a rental before that moment, you're grandfathered in. You keep negative gearing as normal. But buy an existing house or unit after that date, and your rental losses can only be offset against other property income, not your wage or salary. New builds are exempt from this, which is clearly designed to push investor money toward fresh construction instead of existing stock. Then there's the capital gains overhaul. From July 1st, 2027, the 50% CGT discount is being replaced with cost-based indexation, plus a new 30% minimum tax rate on net capital gains. According to law firm Holding Redlich, anyone holding a rental through a discretionary trust is looking at 3 layers of tax costs stacking on top of each other: quarantined losses, the new CGT treatment, and, starting July 2028, a 30% minimum tax on the trust's income itself. Tax advisors at Holding Redlich put it plainly: for trust-held property investors, the cumulative impact is far greater than the sum of the parts. Meanwhile, back at the state level, the Victorian government handed down its own 2026-27 budget on May 5th, just a week before the federal one. And here's the twist: Treasurer Jacqueline Symes didn't add any new land tax measures this time. No new rate hikes, no new thresholds. But the existing land tax system, including the COVID debt levy that runs until 2033, isn't going anywhere. Victoria is still forecast to collect $7.6 billion in land tax in 2026-27 alone, plus another $10 billion from stamp duty. Pitcher Partners summed it up by saying property owners are still doing most of the heavy lifting for the state budget. So, nothing new from the state, but the federal changes landed right on top of a system that was already squeezing investors. That's the 2026 tax shock.
As of this month, June 2026, Melbourne's market is showing real strain on the buying side. Metropol's latest market update has auction clearance rates scraping near 50% and estimated sales running about 14% below where they were a year ago. Their read is that the investor segment that historically provided a floor under Melbourne prices is now facing what they call its most significant policy headwind in a generation. And here's the part that should worry anyone renting in Melbourne. Gross rental yields in the city are now the highest of any major Australian capital. Normally, that would pull investors back in, but mortgage rates are still sitting well above those yields. So even with strong rents, the math for a new investor buying today doesn't work. Metropol's analysts say investors who bought expecting capital growth to make up the difference are instead watching values move against them in some pockets. Real Estate Institute of Victoria CEO Kelly Ryan has said agents are increasingly seeing landlords sell up and move their money into other states. Her warning was direct: it's a massive issue because renters are going to have less choice.
So where does that leave things? Vacancy under 2%, rents climbing towards $600 a week for a median Melbourne house, a wave in investors who've already left, and a brand new federal tax structure that makes buying an existing rental property less attractive than it's been in years. The properties being grandfathered under the old negative gearing rules will probably stick around for now. But anyone thinking about buying their first investment property in Victoria after May 12th is working with a completely different set of numbers than the landlord next door who bought 5 years ago. And that's why homeowners, renters and investors across Victoria are all watching the next 12 months extremely closely. If rental stock keeps shrinking while population growth keeps adding tenants, the squeeze on renters isn't going away, it's just getting started. If you want me to break down how this affects a specific scenario, buying your first investment property, or what happens if you're already holding through a trust, let me know in the comments and I'll dig into it.